It's October, so I'll be having videos all month long on horror films and horror-related news. My first video is to discuss the three mighty horror series that arrived in the late 1970s and 1980s and redefined fear, terror, and horror. Halloween arrived in 1978 and became known as the first true slasher film. The film broke box office records, making $55 million to $70 million worldwide. Following the success of Halloween, another horror series would emerge that would become a powerful force that would dominate the 80s and take horror to a whole new level. Arriving in May 1980, Friday the 13th shocked the world with major gore and creative death scenes and ended up making almost $60 million worldwide. In 1984, filmmakers inspired by Halloween and Friday the 13th would take those films to the next level. Writer and director Wes Craven succeeded in creating a horror icon that took Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees to the next level. His name was Freddy Krueger, a child murderer that could invade you in your sleep and taunted you with sinister humor and creative kills. The first film arrived November 1984 and made $25,500,000. You would think since Halloween arrived first that it would have the highest grossing figures in its series, but it doesn't. Right now there are 10 Halloween films and their combined gross is $366,893,444 worldwide. The Friday the 13th franchise currently has 12 Friday the 13th films, and their combined gross is $465,239,523 worldwide. The Nightmare on Elm Street series currently has 9 A Nightmare on Elm Street films, and their combined gross is $457,001,847 worldwide. Right now, both the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street series have grossed more than the Halloween series. The reason why is very simple. Despite the original Halloween being ended on a cliffhanger, it was never intended as a franchise, so for 3 years no sequel was made. But in 1981, Halloween 2 arrived and made over $25 million at the theater, beating most other horror films including Friday the 13th Part 2. The 80s were great years for horror films, so continuing on the series was logical, but unfortunately, Halloween's creators failed to realize how important Michael Myers was. Both the Halloween and Friday the 13th series debated what to do with their sequels. Halloween unfortunately went with a story unrelated to Michael Myers, while Friday the 13th went with Jason Voorhees, which proved successful. Halloween 3 was an okay film, but not what the fans wanted. While the Friday the 13th franchise was making films almost every year in the 80s, the Halloween series collected dust. In 1984, Nightmare on Elm Street arrives and kicked up a storm, with this new killer creating massively successful sequels. Despite a few bumps, the Friday the 13th series and A Nightmare on Elm Street series would dominate the 80s. But in 1988, on the 10th anniversary of the Halloween series, Halloween would return with a storm, and Halloween 4 arrived, bringing the series back with a vengeance. In 1989, unfortunately, the horror genre was dying and coming to an end, and as a result, the Three Titans would suffer because of it. Halloween 5 was not the worst film in the series, but it had its problems and ended up making only $11.5 million, becoming the lowest grossing film in the series. Friday the 13th Part 8 was a disappointment and only made a little over $14 million and becoming the second lowest grossing film in the series. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 had its own problems, but not having enough kills and as a result suffered from negative reviews and only made $22 million and was the second lowest grossing film in the series. In the early 1990s, the horror genre was all but dead, but still some of the Titans were able to succeed. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare managed to make almost $35 million, though this was due to the fact that it was marketed as the last film, and because the last 10 minutes of the film were in 3D. In 1993, Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday arrived and, despite its questionable plot, made almost $16 million, doing better than its predecessor. In 1994, director Wes Craven returned to the Nightmare on Elm Street series and created Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was an excellent film, but unfortunately only made $19 million, making it the lowest grossing film in the series. In 1995, Halloween would return with Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, but unfortunately, this was not the film we were supposed to get, and it made no sense and got bad reviews, but did better at the box office, making $15 million. After the Three Titans failed to revive the horror genre, it looked like all hope was lost, but a new horror series inspired by the Three Titans would allow the Three Titans to make a comeback. Scream arrived in 1996 and successfully revived the horror genre. In 1998, 20 years after the original film, Halloween would return with a vengeance again, in Halloween H2O. It did amazingly well in theaters, making $73 million worldwide. In 2001, Jason X arrived and had an interesting plot and made over $16 million worldwide. In 2002, Halloween Resurrection arrived and, despite some questionable moves, made over $37 million. In 2007, realizing sequels were no longer working and remakes started to emerge. Despite sequels no longer working, there was one thing that would drive fans back to the theaters: a showdown. Freddy vs. Jason arrived in 2003 and didn't disappoint, delivered major action, blood, and guts, and ultimately broke box office records, making almost $150 million worldwide. Halloween was remade and arrived in the summer of 2007, even with mixed debate, made over $80 million worldwide. In 2009, Friday the 13th remake arrived, which they tried to make a hybrid of the first 4 films, and it kind of worked. It made over $91 million. In 2009, the first remake sequel arrived, H2. Now, the trailer looked great, but it was a horrible film, and almost everyone hated it, and despite this, it almost made $39 million. In 2010, A Nightmare on Elm Street's remake arrived, and despite negative reviews, it still made over $150 million worldwide. In the 1970s, the Halloween franchise ruled the horror genre. The 1980s were ruled by Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street series. The first half of the 90s was ruled by all 3, but the last half was truly ruled by Scream. But Halloween H2O would ultimately rule the original 3 Titans. The 2000s were ruled by ultimately Freddy vs. Jason. The 3 remakes each did better than the other, but Halloween was the only one so far to produce a remake sequel. Despite the current order of the 3 Titans, it clearly shows that all of the 3 could fall but rise up again. And the 3 horror Titans, despite no progress with further sequels as of yet, will have solid legacies in the horror world. Tune in tomorrow as I discuss another horror-related topic. This is the Entertainment Wizard, signing off.